Hidden from the world's gaze, nestled within the rugged, mountainous terrain of North Korea, lies a secret archipelago of human suffering. These are the Kwanliso, a network of political prison camps, vast in scale and brutal in their purpose. For decades, they have been the final destination for those deemed enemies of the state, a place where generations are born and die without ever knowing a world beyond the electrified fences. Tonight, we venture into this heart of darkness, piecing together the harrowing reality of these camps through the courageous testimonies of the few who have escaped. Their stories paint a chilling picture of a system designed not just to punish, but to erase individuals from history. The Kwanliso are not ordinary prisons. They are sprawling compounds, some as large as a major city, where up to 3 generations of a single family can be incarcerated under the 3-generation punishment rule. The alleged crime of one person condemns their children and grandchildren to a life of hard labor, starvation, and unimaginable cruelty. This policy is a cornerstone of the system, intended to root out the seed of dissent entirely. Life inside is a relentless struggle for survival. Days begin before dawn, with prisoners forced into grueling labor in mines, logging operations, or agricultural fields. They work with primitive tools, often barefoot, for 12 to 16 hours a day, regardless of the weather. Malnutrition is a constant companion. The daily food ration is a handful of crushed corn or potatoes, often rotten, a portion so meager that it institutionalizes starvation. Survivors speak of eating anything they can find, insects, rats, snakes, or even grass, just to stay alive. The lack of food is compounded by a near-total absence of medical care. Diseases like tuberculosis and pellagra run rampant. A simple injury can become a death sentence due to infection. The guards, who hold absolute power, subject the prisoners to routine beatings and torture for the slightest infractions, or sometimes for no reason at all. Public executions are common, serving as a terrifying spectacle to enforce obedience and extinguish any flicker of hope. One of the most infamous camps is Camp 14 in Kichin. It is a total control zone, meaning its prisoners are considered irredeemable and are never expected to be released. Shin Dong-hyuk, one of the only known individuals to have been born in and escaped from a total control zone, described a world devoid of human affection. He was taught to see his own mother as a rival for food and was forced to watch her execution after he reported her escape plan. His story, and others like it, reveal a system that actively deconstructs family, trust, and every basic human bond. Another survivor, Kang Cholhwan, was imprisoned in Yodok Camp, Camp 15, at the age of 9, along with his entire family. Yodok has 2 zones, a revolutionary zone for re-education, from which some are eventually released, and the total control zone from which there is no return. King spent 10 years in the revolutionary zone, witnessing horrors that have haunted him ever since. He describes the constant fear, the public executions, and the desperate fight for scraps of food that turned fellow prisoners against one another. How does this system persist? It operates under a thick veil of secrecy and denial. The North Korean government has consistently denied the existence of these camps, calling the reports fabrications by hostile forces. However, satellite imagery from independent organizations corroborates the survivors' accounts. These images show the vast perimeters, guard towers, and internal structures of the camps, tracking their expansion and activity over the years. The evidence is stark and irrefutable. These camps are the physical manifestation of the regime's ideology of absolute control. The population is categorized according to their Songbun, a system of social classification based on the perceived political loyalty of their ancestors. Those from hostile classes are most at risk of being sent to a Kwanliso for the smallest perceived transgression, listening to a foreign radio broadcast, criticizing the leadership, or attempting to flee the country. Even failing to properly maintain a portrait of the leaders can be grounds for imprisonment. The international community has repeatedly condemned North Korea's human rights record. A landmark 2014 United Nations Commission of Inquiry report concluded that the gravity, scale, and nature of the violations in North Korea were without any parallel in the contemporary world and amounted to crimes against humanity. Yet, meaningful action remains elusive. Geopolitical complexities and the regime's isolationist posture have made it incredibly difficult to hold its leaders accountable or to bring relief to the estimated 80,000 to 120,000 people still languishing in these camps. The stories of the defectors are not just tales of suffering, they are also testaments to the incredible resilience of the human spirit. Escaping a Kwanliso is a near impossible feat. It involves navigating treacherous terrain, evading patrols, and crossing a heavily fortified border, all while severely malnourished and physically weak. Those who make it out carry the immense burden of their past, but they also carry a crucial message for the world. They speak for the voiceless, for the tens of thousands who remain trapped in a system designed to silence them forever. Their courage forces us to confront an uncomfortable truth. In the 21st century, a vast network of concentration camps continues to operate, largely hidden from view. The details are horrifying, the scale is staggering, and the silence of the international community is deafening. As we listen to these accounts, we are reminded of our shared responsibility to bear witness, to demand action, and to ensure that the forgotten prisoners of North Korea are not erased from our collective conscience. Punishment is collective to break solidarity. If one person fails to meet labor quotas, the group suffers reduced food. This turns survival into competition. Friendship becomes dangerous. Compassion becomes liability. Survivors describe how hunger reshapes morality. When the body is starving, the mind narrows. The future disappears. Ethics become luxuries. Some prisoners steal food from the sick. Others hoard scraps. Some betray fellow inmates for small privileges. These actions are not framed as cruelty, but as survival. The system does not punish this behavior. It relies on it. Division among prisoners prevents unity. Isolation ensures no collective resistance forms. Education inside the camps is minimal and ideological. Children are taught that their imprisonment is justified, that their parents were traitors, that suffering is proof of the state's righteousness. This psychological conditioning ensures that even those born into captivity may internalize guilt for crimes they did not commit. Work never stops. Prisoners are marched to labor sites before dawn. They work until exhaustion. Then they are returned to barracks where food barely replaces the calories burned. In winter, cold kills as effectively as hunger. In summer, disease spreads faster. There are no days off. There are no holidays. There is no concept of rest. Even death does not stop labor. If a prisoner collapses and dies, the work line moves around the body. The quota remains. The guards themselves operate within a rigid system. They are rewarded for discipline and punished for leniency. Showing sympathy is seen as weakness. Weakness is considered dangerous. Some guards grow numb. Others grow cruel. The system does not require personal malice. It only requires compliance. The outside world receives fragments of this reality through satellite images and survivor testimony. Images reveal fence compounds, watchtowers, and industrial zones. Testimonies describe hunger, executions, and generational punishment. The North Korean government denies the existence of these camps entirely. Officials claim defectors lie. They dismiss satellite imagery as misinterpretation. They label human rights reports as propaganda. Because access is impossible, the camps exist in a space between denial and evidence. They are visible enough to confirm existence, but hidden enough to avoid accountability. This ambiguity serves the state. Without direct observation, there is no international intervention. Condemnation exists, but consequence does not. For the prisoners, global politics offers no relief. Sanctions do not open cell doors. Diplomatic negotiations do not change labor quotas. News about the outside world does not reach them. Time moves differently inside the camps. Years are marked by seasons of hunger and cold. People age rapidly. Children grow up without knowing freedom. Elders die without knowing if the world remembers them. Escape is rare. The camps are surrounded by electrified fences, minefields, and armed patrols. Prisoners are under constant surveillance. Even attempting to run can result in public execution. Those who do escape often do so by chance. A broken fence, a distracted guard, a moment of chaos during transport. The journey out of the camps does not lead directly to freedom. Most escapees must cross borders illegally, avoid capture, and survive trafficking networks. Many are recaptured and sent back. Those who return face punishment worse than before. For the few who reach safety, testimony becomes a burden. They carry memories that cannot be unlearned. They speak for those who cannot. Their stories are dismissed by some as exaggerated. But across testimonies, patterns repeat. Hunger, forced labor, executions, collective punishment. These patterns form a consistent picture. The camps are not anomalies. They are the architecture of control. They exist because fear works. They persist because silence protects them. They endure because the world cannot intervene where it cannot see. And so the camps remain, vast, hidden, and largely untouched by the forces that govern the rest of the world. Over time, The prison camps shape not only the lives of those imprisoned, but the psychology of the entire country. When a society knows that disappearance is possible without warning, behavior changes. People become cautious in ways that go beyond law. Self-censorship becomes instinctive. Silence becomes protection. This effect is intentional. The camps are not just places of punishment, they are instruments of social control. Their purpose is to exist as a threat, even to those who will never see them. Children grow up learning which questions not to ask. Families learn which topics not to discuss. Teachers learn which histories not to teach. Fear becomes cultural inheritance. This is how control sustains itself without constant violence. The system does not need to punish everyone. It only needs to punish enough people that the rest learn to comply. In the camps, the same principle applies. A single public execution serves to discipline thousands. A single beating teaches silence to an entire work unit. One person's suffering becomes a lesson for all. The result is a population trained to anticipate punishment before it arrives. This anticipation reshapes identity. People learn to suppress doubt. They learn to display loyalty even when it feels empty. Over time, the performance becomes reality. The camps thus extend beyond their fences. They exist psychologically in every home, every school, every workplace. For prisoners inside the camps, this psychological control becomes internalized. Many stop thinking of themselves as victims. Some begin to believe the state's narrative, that they deserve their punishment. Others hold on to a private sense of injustice but learn not to express it. The mind adapts to survive. The cost of this adaptation is high. Survivors often struggle to make decisions after escape. Years of having every movement dictated erodes initiative. Freedom feels overwhelming. Choice becomes anxiety. Simple tasks, choosing food, choosing where to walk, choosing when to rest, feel unfamiliar. Some former prisoners describe freedom as disorienting rather than joyful. Nightmares persist. Sounds trigger panic. Doors closing cause physical reactions. Uniformed figures evoke terror. The camps leave marks that do not fade when fences are crossed. International responses to North Korea's prison camps are limited to condemnation and sanctions. Reports are issued. Resolutions are passed. Statements are made. But access remains impossible. The state denies wrongdoing. Foreign observers are restricted to guided tours far from camp regions. Satellite imagery confirms infrastructure, but not daily life. Testimonies accumulate, but enforcement mechanisms do not exist. This creates a paradox. The world knows these camps exist. The world cannot reach them. As a result, the camps continue unchanged. They are not secrets anymore. They are realities without consequence. This normalizes their existence in a dangerous way. When atrocities persist without intervention, they become background noise. Outrage fades. Attention shifts. New crises emerge. The prisoners remain. Within the camps, resistance is nearly impossible. Collective action is punished. Communication is monitored. Movement is restricted. Trust is undermined by fear of informants. Even small acts of defiance carry fatal risk. Some prisoners attempt to preserve dignity through tiny rituals. Sharing food crumbs. Remembering names. Teaching children to count. These acts are fragile forms of resistance. They do not change the system. They preserve fragments of humanity within it. The camps are designed to erase those fragments. Not through sudden violence, but through slow erosion. Day by day, hunger narrows thought. Fatigue weakens resolve. Fear suppresses expression. The system does not require constant cruelty. It relies on routine. This routine is what makes the camps durable. They do not depend on exceptional brutality. They function through predictability. Predictability becomes control. Outside observers often imagine the camps as places of constant horror. The reality is more insidious. The horror is ordinary. It is the monotony of suffering, the normalization of deprivation, the expectation of pain. When suffering becomes routine, outrage loses its edge. This is how systems of extreme control survive. Not through spectacle, but through normalization. The camps continue to operate because they fit seamlessly into the logic of the state. They reinforce loyalty through fear. They eliminate dissent quietly. They require no justification once fear becomes accepted. The question is not why the camps exist. The question is why they endure. They endure because the system that created them still depends on them. They endure because fear remains an effective tool. They endure because the world has not found a way to reach inside closed borders with consequence. For the prisoners, endurance is not a choice. It is the only option. Days blur into labor. Labor blurs into exhaustion. Exhaustion blurs into survival. There is no horizon. Some prisoners die young. Others survive into old age, bent by work, hollowed by hunger. Their lives pass without record, without recognition, without acknowledgement. The camps do not produce stories meant to be heard. They produce silence. And silence is the point. In the end, North Korea's prison camps are not defined by their fences or guard towers. They are defined by what they remove. They remove people from public memory. They remove families from communities. They remove the idea that dissent can exist without consequence. The camps are not simply places of confinement. They are tools designed to reshape behavior across an entire society. By making punishment invisible and absolute, the state ensures that fear becomes internal. People do not need to see the camps to obey them. They only need to know that they exist. This knowledge changes how people live. Words are chosen carefully. Opinions are kept private. Curiosity becomes dangerous. Silence becomes safety. In this way, the camps extend far beyond their physical borders. They shape classrooms, workplaces, homes, and relationships. They determine what can be imagined and what must remain unspoken. For those imprisoned, the camps strip life down to survival. Hunger becomes routine. Labor becomes endless. Pain becomes ordinary. The body adapts to deprivation. The mind adapts to fear. Over time, even suffering becomes normalized. This normalization is the system's greatest strength. When suffering is ordinary, resistance fades. When deprivation is expected, outrage weakens. When silence is enforced, memory erodes. The camps do not need to justify themselves. They simply continue. International condemnation has not changed this reality. Reports document abuse. Testimonies confirm patterns. Satellite images reveal infrastructure. Yet the camps persist because the structures that protect them remain intact. Borders remain closed. Access remains restricted. Accountability remains unreachable. The prisoners live in a world where global politics has no meaning. Diplomacy does not feed them. Sanctions do not reduce their labor quotas. Resolutions do not open gates. For them, the world ends at the fence. The most unsettling aspect of North Korea's prison camps is not their cruelty, but their permanence. They are not emergency measures. They are not temporary responses. They are built to endure. This permanence signals a worldview in which punishment is not meant to correct behavior, but to eliminate perceived threat permanently. In such a system, justice becomes irrelevant. What matters is stability through fear. The camps are effective at this. They suppress dissent. They discourage curiosity. They fracture trust. But they do so by erasing lives quietly. The people who vanish into these camps are rarely remembered. Their names fade. Their stories are absorbed into statistics. Their suffering becomes abstract. This abstraction makes the system easier to tolerate from a distance. It is easier to condemn an idea than to confront individual lives. Yet behind every report, every satellite image, every testimony, there are people whose lives have been reduced to labor and hunger. They wake each day to repeat the same motions. They grow old in the same fields. They die where they were sent to disappear. The camps do not offer endings. There is no redemption arc. There is no release for most. The story does not resolve. It continues quietly, out of sight. And that quiet continuation is what makes these camps one of the most enduring symbols of modern repression. They remind the world that systems of control do not always collapse. Some endure precisely because they are hidden. Some survive because they do not shock, but normalize. North Korea's prison camps exist not because they are secret, but because they are accepted as unchangeable by those who cannot reach them. This acceptance is their shield. As long as the camps remain beyond consequence, they will continue to shape lives that never appear on maps or in official histories. The people inside them will continue to work, to starve, to disappear. And the world will continue to know, and be unable to stop it. This is the reality of North Korea's prison camps. Not a moment in history. Not a crisis with an end date. But a system designed to last. Even when the gates of the camps are unseen, Their influence continues to shape the lives of people who will never step inside them. Fear travels faster than fences. It moves through families, through generations, through stories whispered late at night. It becomes part of how people learn to survive. In societies where punishment is invisible but absolute, silence becomes a form of language. People learn to speak around what cannot be said. They learn to live around what cannot be acknowledged. The camps thrive on this silence. They do not need to be hidden completely. They only need to remain unreachable. As long as no one can walk their corridors freely, no one can challenge the reality inside them with consequence. This distance creates abstraction. From afar, prison camps become ideas, topics for reports, headlines for articles, footage for documentaries. But for those inside, they are not ideas. They are the totality of life. Each day is measured not in hope, but in endurance. Each night is survived, not rested. Each year passes without a horizon. The human body adapts to almost anything. It learns to function with less food. It learns to endure cold. It learns to obey when resistance brings pain. But the human spirit adapts differently. Some spirits break. Some retreat inward. Some survive by shrinking their world to the size of the present moment. None of these adaptations are victories. They are mechanisms of survival inside a system that does not allow escape. When people outside hear these stories, there is often disbelief. The scale feels unreal. The cruelty feels too deliberate to be ordinary. But systems of repression rarely feel dramatic from within. They feel routine. That routine is what sustains them. The most dangerous systems are not those that shock once, but those that normalize suffering until it no longer provokes reaction. North Korea's prison camps represent this normalization taken to its extreme. They are not chaotic. They are organized. They are not secretive by accident. They are hidden by design. And they exist not as relics of the past, but as functioning parts of the present. This reality forces an uncomfortable recognition. The world is capable of knowing about suffering without being able to stop it. Awareness alone does not dismantle systems. Documentation alone does not break fences. Change requires access. Access requires leverage. And leverage is absent where borders remain sealed. Until those conditions change, the camps will continue to operate beyond the reach of consequence. The people inside will continue to wake to labor, hunger, and silence. They will continue to disappear without records. Their lives will continue to pass without witnesses. This is not a story with resolution. It is a reality that persists without closure. And perhaps that is the most difficult part to accept. Some systems of suffering do not collapse dramatically. They endure quietly. They persist because they are insulated from the forces that end them. North Korea's prison camps remain one of those systems. Not because the world does not know, but because knowing is not the same as being able to intervene. And until intervention becomes possible, the camps will remain what they have always been, places where people are removed from the world, and the world continues without them.